welcome to the Hunger Trap podcast. My name is Lisa.
I'm Diana.
And we're here to talk about all things eating disorders, disordered eating, body image.
But first, a disclaimer. We are not healthcare providers. We're not psychologists. We're just talking about our own personal experiences with eating disorders and food issues to let others know that they are not alone in their struggles.
If you are currently seeking help for an eating disorder and you're kind of early on in the process, you may find some of the things we talk about weight and food in our own eating disorders, a little bit triggering. So just take care of yourself before you listen. So today we kind of want to talk, well, first we want to debunk a myth about eating disorders, and that will kind of lead us to what we want to chat about today. Diana and I met recently after having grown up in the same neighborhood and going to the same Catholic high school together. And we discovered upon meeting as adults that we share a lot of things in common. And one of them is shared experience with eating disorders. I developed anorexia at around 12 and have been in recovery for it for years now. Most of the time it's going really well. Sometimes the thoughts creep back in and have to be addressed, but it's an ongoing process that I'm part of.
I was put on my first diet when I was about 8 years old, and as a result, I have struggled with food issues. I have been anywhere from, overweight to obese to morbidly obese throughout my life. I have not been formally diagnosed with an eating disorder, but it has been suggested that I have, binge eating disorder or obsessive issues with food, compulsive overeating, things like that. And it's definitely something that I have been struggling with for as many years as 34 years.
And one of the reasons why we started this podcast was because we felt like we wanted to just talk to people about what it's really like living with an eating disorder, because a lot of things about EDs are very misunderstood. So one of the things that I actually hear people say that I got to get out there is people will say, hey, I wouldn't mind being a little anorexic, like as if it's a diet plan that you can just hop on and off. And even though some of us, many of us, maybe most of us develop our eating disorders as a way of losing weight at first or, attaining some sort of dream body that we have in our minds, I feel like there's always this fork in the road where you start off that way. You start off either, trying to lose that weight. And I'm speaking about anorexia. You can fill in the gaps here.
Okay.
So with anorexia, I feel like there's a fork in the road where we may start down the same path, but people who won't develop an ED might stop dieting for a while, or they might even continue having disordered eating patterns that plague them for the rest of their lives. But then the other path that people who develop the ED, the anorexia, take, it's kind of like it hits you when you're not expecting it. You think you're still dieting, but it's actually developed into this bad eating disorder that takes over your entire life and controls you.
Yes. I mean, I think my first experience, true experience, and acknowledging that, wow, I really have a problem here, this is an issue, happened in college. And it was after a round of extreme dieting and exercising over the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I lost, 60 pounds or some crazy amount. Oh, should we not talk about numbers? Well, whatever, the number's there. That's how much I lost.
It's a controversial issue for people, but I don't know if there's a right or a wrong. You're not stating your weight either.
Exactly. So I was just about to say, you don't know what my starting or my ending weight was there. So, and we'll just leave it at that. But I remember going out for somebody's birthday, a birthday dinner at a Mexican restaurant, and I ordered a plate of food that I was not engaging in for the last 4 or 5 months. And when the plate was put down in front of me, I had a full-blown panic attack about possibly like, oh my God, I can't eat this. I'm going to gain all my weight back. What am I doing? Why is this in front of me? And I remember looking around the table at everybody else who was just kind of like enjoying themselves and drinking margaritas and eating their food. And me thinking, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. And I was like, wow, these other people aren't having this experience right now, are they? This is a little, fucked up. So
right. And you thought that was going to happen just eating one meal.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the enchilada suizas. I still remember what the dish was. So yeah, that was my first sign that the quote unquote healthy, the first time I became aware of it. Listen, when I look back now at things that I participated in from 8 years old on, I recognize the disordered behavior from even that age. But that was the first time in the moment I really recognized that, oh, this is beyond quote unquote take being healthy, or
Yeah.
this is a disorder, I guess is my point.
So, why people develop EDs? That is just a question that's so difficult to answer, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's a complex question. It's not like these types of diseases. It's not like there's this one gene. It's not like Huntington's disease or Tay-Sachs disease where there's this one mutated gene that leads to a condition. It's a complex, web of both probably genetic predisposition, and then also we do not grow in a vacuum. We don't live in a vacuum. And so your environment is going to, your psychological environment is going to impact your, whether or not you develop an eating disorder, cultural expectations. Other environmental factors may also, like biochemical environmental factors, may also influence. I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe one of these days we're going to talk to an expert who's done actual research in the field. But, what we do want to focus on today, a lot of people start with eating disorders as a method to lose weight or control the body. But there's also the common theme around using an eating disorder to become more invisible to the world around us.
It's such a myth that you just want to lose weight to be seen, right? You want to be like the sexy person at the party wearing this tight dress. And eating disorders really are not about that. So, eating disorders do affect people of all genders, all ages. You can definitely develop an eating disorder at any age. But there have been studies conducted that show that there is a large portion of adolescent girls whom they followed for many years who are prone to developing anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, as well as what's considered nonspecific eating disorder symptoms, which can't really be categorized under those three banners. And Diana and I have personal experiences with our disorders popping up around the time of puberty.
Yes. And so we wanted to kind of like hop in our time machines, right? And take a little trip back in time, thinking about how our eating disorders developed and what we discovered about the time in our lives that they discovered and how they kind of coincided with pubescent development, and how maybe a part of the reason why they developed was because we had a desire to disappear or make parts of ourselves vanish, even though we had polar opposite body experiences during puberty because of the times that we went through it and stuff. But
Hmm.
we'll get into that when we discuss our actual experiences. But like blossoming into a woman is just, it's not a bed of roses for all of us. In fact, I don't know anybody who could say like they sailed through puberty like with flying colors and everything went wonderfully for us. But there's this thought that starving and restricting and trying to be smaller is a way to become more invisible, and that might be a component for anorexia. But there's the flip side of that, is that the larger a woman gets in our society, the more invisible she is to the world too. And so there's this idea that like, do body type extremes offer a sense of protection, a cloak of invisibility? You would think that being either extremely thin or extremely fat would actually call more attention to our physiques, right? Because if you see somebody who's really, deviating from the mean, right, you're going to do a double take in either direction. And it's just kind of like natural kind of reaction to seeing something that's different from what you usually see. But, we were wondering, this paradox of disappearing into an extreme, either extreme
Yes.
thinness or extreme obesity or larger body. How did this come about and when did it start? So,
So I guess I'll start. I was a late bloomer. I didn't get my period until I was like 14. So I always suspected, and I've been told that this may be the case. Since I started restricting around 11, I may have delayed my period by a few years. And I wasn't upset about it at all. I wasn't like longing for breasts. I wasn't longing for any of it. I was fine without it. Anyway, I went away to Italy for a summer, and when I came back that summer, after that summer, nature always wins. I had gotten my period. I had developed some boobs. I had developed a butt. It was very strange. I had a friend at the time. She lived about 2 blocks from me, and I kind of lived at her house. Like I would go there 4 or 5 days a week. And I was walking to her home. It was like late summer. I had on whatever, a pair of shorts like any kid would be wearing. And as I'm walking to her house, this car pulls up beside me and kind of starts trailing me. And there's this oldish guy in it who rolls down the window and he goes, "I'd love to suck your tits." And I was like, "What the fuck is that?" I This is the first time I ever experienced any kind of attention like that from a man, not even a boy, a man. And
Ugh.
I felt like I just turned red and like ran to Josie's house. It's like, holy shit, what is this? And felt really bad about myself.
How old was he?
He's probably in his 30s, but to me, when you're 14, a guy who's 30 looks like he's your dad, basically, you
Yeah,
know?
well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
It's pretty horrible. And I didn't look, even though I had a little bit of boobs and a butt, it's not like I look like a grown woman. You still look like a child, you know? And then from that day on, I just started noticing I became aware of like I couldn't walk. It felt like you couldn't leave your house and go to the boulevard to get something, to get candy, whatever, without people, guys, stopping you. Like stopping you,
Mm-hmm.
always driving the cars because we lived in the suburban area, always trailing you with their cars, which is like a nightmare if you think about it.
Yep.
And I became very aware of how boys our age had so much more freedom to move around. They could make a plan to go from point A to point B, to go to the boulevard, get whatever, get a burger, whatever, and nobody would bother them. Nobody would like suddenly interject themselves into their lives and make their day shitty by saying this like disgusting thing to them. It did affect how I wanted to like get rid of the parts of my body that I saw were drawing attention. So started restricting more after that. And it was like, let's say I got my period at 14. By 15 going into 16, I lost my period from restricting. So
Wow.
that's how much it affected me and made me kind of want to disappear. I was not equipped or ready or whatever to handle that kind of attention. But then at the same time, I had a good friend who had very, very large breasts that she developed at a young age. I would say like she was like 10 when she developed them. And she constantly got attention for her breasts. She constantly got nasty comments for her breasts. Guys would touch her, suggest things to her, whatever. She Knowing her, she was a very innocent girl. She wasn't doing anything. She wasn't doing anything. She was sleeping with stuffed animals at night. But she would giggle at the comments and she would kind of play along with it a lot. Looking back now, I wonder if that wasn't her throwing her own kind of cloak of invisibility over herself and like leaving her breast exposed for like everybody to assume that that's what she was, because that's a shit ton easier than fighting back and like forcing people to know that you are more than just your body parts. And I can't speak for her, of course. I'm just wondering now with adult eyes if that's maybe what it was.
That's definitely a possibility. And I really identified with your big boob friend. And I actually know who it is because in the neighborhood, there were three of us. There were three of us girls who developed really young. I was one of them and had big breasts. It appears that we all handled it a little bit differently, and I'm basing my assumption on this of my own memories and experiences with these two other girls and my own experiences, and it's possible that they had similar feelings of shame and distress as I did, but it appeared that they kind of embraced the attention and they handled it better than I did. But your thought about that cloak of invisibility tossed over the person and just leaving that fetishized, objectified body part exposed so that the rest of the person could stay safe is a very interesting thought. I didn't really do that myself. So I also went through puberty very young. I had signs of puberty at 7 or 8 years old. I had my first period by 9. And I was physically a full-blown woman by fourth grade. If you look at my class photo, you could very easily mistake me for the teacher. I was physically mature. I was physically a woman, but mentally a child and emotionally a child. My reaction, I also received that attention, was called a slut, because I had big boobs. They hand that those girls, the two that I'm thinking of, there might have been others, but the two that I'm thinking of, they handled it so much better than I did. They giggled it off. Sometimes I would giggle, but most of the times I would get really, really angry and I would mouth off and I'd curse at the guys. And frankly, I'd outsmart them because I was smarter than all of them pretty
Right.
much. And I would ridicule them in the same way they were trying to ridicule me because of my body. I would find things to say about them and it would escalate to the point of physical violence. And there was a sexual component to that. I mean, really, by today's standards, we would consider it sexual assault. I feel like when we were growing up, it was like schoolhouse roughhousing,
Yes.
no, it was sexual assault. I was held down, my shirt pulled up, my breasts exposed and
Ugh.
grabbed, pants pulled down. Yeah, it was, never penetrated, but physically assaulted. And it happened more than once. And it was with men, boys. They were our age. They weren't adults. They were boys our age. But it would happen when they would challenge me, when they would want to objectify me and either grab my breasts or talk about them in a sexually suggestive way, and I would outsmart them and you know put back them into a corner, basically, that the only way they knew how to get out of that corner was to assault me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's wild that we make assumptions about that anybody makes assumptions about who's essentially a child based on factors they can't control. Our attitudes about it might be, I don't want to say lax, but maybe that's the right word, more forgiving, more lax than younger girls now growing up. I think like they would be like, "Oh hell no. Oh hell no. There's no excuse for that. There's no this is, roughhousing, school, whatever, schoolboy roughhousing." And the generation before us is even more forgiving of it. And like
Boys will be
you and
boys.
I sometimes will be like something happened where I thought of something that happened in high school where I was like assaulted in the back of the classroom. And I'm laughing not because it's funny, because it's crazy. It was like a teacher teaching, and this boy would like reach out and touch my butt and my boobs. And I did giggle. So, you know what? The giggling was kind of like, I don't want to call attention to this. That would be even more embarrassing for some reason because it would make it seem like I want this. So as I'm saying this out loud, I'm like thinking of my friend that I just spoke about. I'm like, that, some of it makes a lot of sense why you would giggle. But when I brought that up to you, it kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, my God, I just remembered this happened. I haven't thought about it
Yes.
in like 25 years. Do you think that's bad? Like, yeah, I think that's pretty fucking bad.
And you know what? I think if we talk to any woman our age, probably younger than us and definitely older than us, regardless of their relationship to their body and their relationship to food, everybody I know has an experience like this.
Yeah.
On the spectrum of things that can happen to you in terms of sexual assault, I know what happened to me. It could have been so much worse. I could have been raped. I wasn't. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize because the experiences I did have definitely had an impact on me and my body and shame around my body.
And so did you feel also like you wanted to become invisible?
Well, you know, yes. Well, you know what? I don't know if it was necessarily that I felt I wanted to become invisible, but it was more a message that was given to me by my stepmother. And again, like, I don't want to spend time bashing her decisions that were made, 30 some odd years ago. Because I now as an adult I think back. So basically what would happen when I was put on my first diet when I was 8 years old, which as you know now was coincident with me starting puberty. And so my body was going through changes. And the weight that I was gaining was probably just my body preparing for puberty, you know? And it was mistaken as the onset of obesity. And then I was really put through the ringer about the quote unquote being overweight. It's a complex issue for me because I did turn to food for comfort a lot, and not to get into any great detail, but I wasn't raised in the most emotionally healthy home. So for me, it might have been, a little bit of both puberty and emotional eating, but I was made to feel ashamed of my womanly body. I was dressed in boxy, bulky clothing. I was made to wear minimizer bras, and the message was hide, hide, hide your body. But again, I have a lot of compassion for my stepmother in this regard, because how the hell do you shepherd a 9-year old into the world when she's built like Sophia
Yeah.
Loren?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? You have this child that has a woman's body, and you as an adult know that men, terrible men, not just like, your run of the mill man, but like really terrible men with bad intentions are lusting after your child,
Yeah.
who is a child who does not know how to emotionally handle this. So I understand the impulse or the feeling to, to hide my body, to dress me in bulky clothing, to minimize the sexuality of my body because I was a child, to protect me from the world. Like, I mean, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback that decision, because I totally understand why it was done. But unfortunately, the takeaway was that I should be ashamed of my body and hide. And I'm still ashamed of my body and hide it in a lot of ways.
Wow. To me, it always felt like my life didn't belong to me as a girl. It felt almost like clay. Like everyone is allowed to step right up, grab a piece, shape it, stomp it, return it to you mangled, whatever, and then you just have to deal with the clay that you get back. It just felt like boys had the ability to go out and shape their lives, and girls, like I said, a comment from a guy who is capable of doing you harm because he's older and more powerful, that can just change your entire day. The more androgynous my body got as I restricted, I wasn't looking in the mirror thinking, look how hot I am. No, I was feeling, but I did feel more protected because when I did lose more weight and when I did lose my period a year later, I wasn't getting the same kind of attention when I walked down the street that my friends were getting, the ones who still had, their shapes and their curves. And I did not feel jealous. I felt good about it. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So I feel like some girls and women may starve to disappear, some eat more to cloak themselves in flesh, and others maybe give up and allow body parts to be objectified. But that's also kind of an interesting one there because, like the Instagram, like there's like Instagram accounts of just women's asses. Have you ever seen those?
I haven't, but I
I try not to get like we just started this Instagram page for the podcast, but other than that, I really don't get much into Instagram. But I've like seen Instagram accounts that are just fitness experts, and it's just like pictures of their asses, and like I I wonder like, what's going on here? Are you objectifying yourself to hide the other parts of yourself? Or are you actually assuming control over your body and your sexuality so that you're in the driver's seat? So that instead of waiting for that guy to come along and be like, look at your ass, you're like, yeah, look at my ass. I want you to look at my ass on my terms. I always kind of wonder about that.
mean, yeah, I mean that's very interesting, it's like taking power back and proactively objectifying certain parts of your body so that you're the one who's in control of the objectification rather than letting yourself fall victim to objectification. It's an interesting thought. I mean, I feel like my objectification happened or started happening at such a young age that I feel like maybe I wasn't in an emotional position to process it and handle it.
How could you be? You're a baby.
Right, I was a child. I was legit a child. I mean, I'll never forget. I was in camp and we had gone, there was like I was a teen at this point. I was probably about 13, 14, and we had gone away with camp to a hotel. And I forgot about this. This guy who worked behind the counter was talking with my friend and we were chatting back and forth. And I think back to it now and I'm like, oh, that man was flirting with me. And I didn't know because I was 13 and I thought he was just this nice man who was talking to us. And at one point, he asked me how old I was because I'm
Mm.
sure he was thinking, like, oh, God, this one's probably about 17, 18 years old and I can't wait to get her up to her room you know, and do whatever. And I was like, 13. And he said, what? He goes, 13, but they're huge.
Oh no, he said that.
It just fell out of his mouth because I'm sure he was like, well, I just hit the fucking titty jackpot here with this like 18-year-old whatever, you know?
Did you have the same experience as I did where when you were at your highest weight, you didn't get the attention and it felt safer?
Um, no. See for me, well, okay. At my highest weight, I didn't get attention, but at my highest weight, I was already an adult. I still got a lot of unwanted attention as a teenager from older men screaming out of cars.
Yeah.
Did I get attention from or wanted attention from boy or contemporaries, like male contemporaries? No. I still remember like in college, before I had lost that chunk of weight, I was basically invisible my freshman year. No man was interested, really. Actually, that's not true. One guy was. Anyway, whatever. But when I lost all that weight, I remember going to a bar and talking to a guy who I had talked to, I don't know, 15, 20 times the year before. And he was like, I don't think we've ever met.
Mm.
And I remember being really, really angry. Like, yeah, we met about 15 times. Like,
Wow.
right.
Yeah.
Just to go back to your question about whether or not I felt safer being overweight, I may have, because I was made to feel so uncomfortable with my body and therefore my sexuality from such a young age. I may have, on a subconscious level, used body weight to keep men at arm's length. Even though maybe on a conscious level, I used to always be very sad and think that, because I was told from a very young age that, men don't like fat women. So if you're a fat woman, you're not going to be loved by a man. There was, I guess, this dichotomy inside of me that like part of me wanted the fat to keep people away because I was scared of vulnerability and expressing myself in a sexual way. And then the other side of that was, I really, really desperately wanted to form relationships with people. So,
Yeah, and
and
we're
the,
going to probably tackle that on another episode because sex and intimacy and eating disorders is a whole other, ball of wax. There's a lot to say about all of that.
mm-hmm,
But
yeah.
I guess we can maybe end with like, now what? How do you feel now with age and with experience and having understanding your eating disorder a lot better? How do we feel now? Do we still try to feel invisible? How do we handle attention? Or, so you were talking about something that happened to you not long ago
Oh, in March,
in
yes.
March.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so back in March of this year, I was at our local park running with a friend, and we happened upon a man who was masturbating in the woods,
Very nice.
and he was doing it on purpose. He wasn't like hiding and like had like a
Yeah.
tree fetish and was like, oh, evergreens. He was where he placed himself was by a footbridge that, and it was right around the time that young girls from our local high school would be coming over to practice soccer.
Mm,
Lovely.
yeah.
So I feel like he was, my friend and I are both, I guess, middle aged, and we were probably like his consolation prize is, damn it, all right, ladies. So I feel like, I was shaken up by it, and I think I broke world records running over that bridge. My, my friend was like, whoa. And she was able, we were both shaken up by the experience. We did call the police, but I feel like she was able to brush it off. And for me, it stuck with me for weeks. I was just like angry and outraged and just like, how dare this man invade my space with his fucked up sexual whatever the hell he was doing.
Yeah.
And I was so angry, and it dawned on me that my friend was like, yeah, that kind of sucks. She still runs in the park by herself. I won't go in there by myself. It really stuck with me for so much longer. And I realized that I guess my space and my womanhood and my sexuality was being invaded by men from such a young age that I was not emotionally equipped to handle it.
Mm,
And I feel like, those wounds, right? And that trauma stuck with me from my childhood and maybe was kicked up for me by this experience I had as a middle-aged woman. And listen, I run around this neighborhood. There was this one guy who used to like trail me in his white van, and he would be like, because I'm probably like, the chunkiest chick in this neighborhood who's running around. And he was like, "Girl, don't run that ass off. That ass is
Ah.
so beautiful. Like, don't run it off. You're gonna run it off. Don't run too much." Like, he was like yelling out of his truck at me, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" First of all, a nuclear bomb would go off, and it would be like cockroaches, and my butt would be left. So, like, don't worry, buddy. It's not going anywhere.
Your butt, but also men in white vans would be left. There's never not a man in a white van who wants to give you advice about your body.
Exactly. So, like, but I feel like that, while I was like annoyed by it, like I was able to brush it off. Like, he just was, and I've seen him over the years. Like, I would run at the middle school track here, and he would beep the horn and wave at me.
Like your friends, your buddies
Yeah, it's
now.
like he's like, "Oh, there goes that big ass that I love again," and I'm like, "Dude, come on."
Oh my God. So a few years ago, I was walking in Manhattan. So I should say, like, I've actually become really good, I think, at separating myself and my bodies from other people's reactions to me. And I don't know if that happened in therapy or if it just happened from kind of observing the way men talk to women on the street and being like, I'm just another girl walking by. As soon as I walk by, you're going to say the same shit to someone else. This is not about me personally at all. So I just got that understanding. And a few years ago, though, I'm walking in Midtown, and a guy reaches out and manages to touch my breast and my vagina at the same time and grab them. And by the time I turn around and he's like looking back at me smirking. So for some fucking reason, I decide that I'm going to be a superhero and I start chasing him. And then I'm chasing him down the block. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I going to do? I'm going to drop kick him in the middle of Manhattan. But I felt that that was a moment of success for me as a woman because I wasn't ashamed of myself. I didn't feel like something I was wearing brought that on. I felt like this is an asshole and I'm going to fucking get up in his face and yell at him. And then I didn't. I didn't do it because you can't really do that to people in Manhattan. You just don't
Yeah.
know who has a gun, whatever.
I mean, I often wonder because I feel like it's not, I would say more often than not when men are screaming things out of the window, it's not because they actually think you're going to turn around and be like, "Oh, well, hello there, sailor." Like, do they really think that they're going to get laid by yelling, don't run that ass off? It's a power thing.
Yeah,
They want to have power over you. They want to have power over your emotions.
exactly. And anyway, we're running out of time. So I think to sum up, right? We just wanted to make this connection between eating disorders and a desire to be invisible so that we kind of debunk a little bit of the myth that EDs are just all about wanting to look like a skinny, sexy young woman. Not always the case.
Nope.
So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Good luck with your journeys.